So it's a great honor to welcome Dr. Ruth Horn. You might even join at our symposium. She's part of our scientific advisory board, but primarily she's a deputy chair of medical ethics at the University of Augsburg and associate professor at the Ethox Center Ethics at Oxford. She received her BA in sociology from the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, and her master as well as her PhD at the University of Paris Diderot. Ruth works on ethical questions raised by medical practices and new technologies in different socio-cultural contexts. Her research is at the intersection between sociology, bioethics, and health policy. So guess why we invited her. And more importantly, Ruth has founded and is co-leading an initiative, the UK-France Genomics and Ethics Network, a network for British and French, and meanwhile also German researchers, lawyers, policymakers, and practitioners to reflect on the ethical questions arising from clinical applications of genomic technologies in the each national context. And that's only one of the contexts that we got to work together and know each other. So today she will talk to us, and the title of her presentation will be The Social Contract and Trust in Large-Scale Genomics Initiatives, a British-French perspective. Ruth, very welcome.
Thank you, Eva, for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to present today at the symposium. My talk, as you mentioned, is on the social contract and trust, and from a comparative perspective, I will even try to include Germany in the comparison, so England, France, and Germany. The presentation mainly draws on discussions we had as part of the consortium Eva just mentioned, the UK-France Genomics and Ethics Network. You already very briefly introduced it. Eva, it's a network I launched in 2018 as sort of a response to the agreement announced by the UK and French governments to strengthen their cooperation in developing genomics and its implementation into routine clinical care. There was very little mention about ethics, and so we thought it would be good to have like a platform where we invite people who are interested in ethical issues arising from this implementation. And so at the beginning, we focused mainly on France and England because they had the two big national initiatives. And 2 years ago, we started inviting Eva as the German partner. And last time, we also had colleagues from Israel presenting. So we try to broaden the network. That's why we call it now Plus UK France Plus team. Yes. So one of the recurring themes at our workshops have been the changes brought about by genomics, and particularly when it's being implemented or introduced into clinical care, because it challenges a number of well-established principles we took for granted for a long time, such as confidentiality, consent, and privacy. So we have to rethink these things in the context of genomic medicine, but also generally in data-driven health care. Genomics also challenges relationships between the clinical care and research. As you know, the boundaries are being blurred, and before it has been very important, and particularly in research ethics, to keep that separate from the clinical sector, for example. It obviously challenges relationships between patients and health professionals, and it also increasingly challenges and questions what partnerships should be held by private and public institutions. Because the public sector increasingly relies on the private sector coming in, making use of the data collected in the public sector to develop health innovation. And this raises regularly concerns among population and the people. Further challenges are about our understandings of illness, health, risk, on what it means, like medical certainty and uncertainty. And with this, genomics questions assumptions, expectations, and responsibilities of and between healthcare systems, patients, and the public. And obviously, in our network, we have not been the only ones talking and discussing these issues. A lot of scholars have been discussing the challenges of genomics medicine, and some of these scholars have been calling for a rethinking of the social contract, or as others call it, the social license. Now, we understand under social contract the explicit and possibly more often even the implicit agreements and expectations between citizens and the government, governing actors, and public institutions. The social contract establishes each party's rights and duties towards each other and their mutual expectations. And with this, it provides basis of social order and trust between the individual and public institutions. So the individual knows what they can expect from the public institution. Now, genomics brings about these changes and challenges established norms and values, and challenges the social contract and the trust that originates from it. So in our workshop, we have been discussing, or very often, I think, we have been discussing how countries, actually the different countries, try to address the challenges posed to the social contract, try to renegotiate the social contract, and in other words, how they try to maintain public trust. And trust here is understood as citizens' reasonable belief in the commitment of public institutions to serve and promote the interests of the public. And I want to take data governance here, including data collection, privacy and consent modalities, and data access plans as a case study to see how the three countries we discuss in our network, how they try to respond to the challenges posed by genomics. Very briefly, and I apologize because I think I will give a very, very brief overview over the three countries, the data management plans, etc. And we had already more in-depth presentations this in the first part of this afternoon. And it will not be a point-by-point comparison, but I will try to highlight some of the particularities in each country. So very briefly, in England, Genomics England has been set up as a private company owned by the UK government to launch the 100,000 Genome Project in 2013. When the sequencing target was achieved in 2018, a new target was set to sequence 5 million further genomes by 23, I think. The evidence and the outcomes of the 100,000 Genome Project has been transitioning into clinical care. And as we have heard earlier, in 2021, the NHS Genomic Medicine Service has been set up to offer both clinical care in like genomic sequencing in routine clinical care, and also continue recruitment for research. So it has a hybrid mission. Testing is also offered to relatives, not only to the patients, but to relatives for trial testing. The consent material for NHS Genomic Medicine Service, we have heard already, is a hybrid consent. It is taken at the same time for its clinical use as well as for research. It was developed together with stakeholders, including patient, participant representatives, and there has been particular focus and attention paid to involve also children, young people, and adults who lack or have lost capacity. Participants or patients/participants who enroll in NHS Genomic Medicine Service consent to have their data used in a pseudonymized form, to be recontacted for further research, and to have the clinically applicable research results returned. Confidentiality in the UK is not absolute, but there's health professionals are asked to consider their duty to respect relatives' interests. So there's no clear obligation to return results to relatives, but it is considered important. And generally in the UK and with regard to Genomics England, we noticed that there's a very strong commitment to public engagement across a diverse and broad population. So it is important to get the whole population on board and to get public support. With regard to data management and sharing, Genomics England has set up the National Genomic Research Library, which means that data can be read but not lent. That means that data can be viewed and analyzed but not downloaded, not taken from the platform, and answers are given to very specific research questions. Researchers who ask for access to the data, they must be affiliated either with an academic institution because they already set up an agreement with Genomics England, or if it's a commercial entity, they have to sign an agreement with Genomics England. It is overseen by a data access committee. Again, it includes participant representation, and the data is stored on a cloud service from Amazon Web Services, and it has been very important, and there's a strong focus on highlighting that it is based in the UK, not outside the UK. So generally, we see there's a very strong focus in England, or England as a devolved nation, on building a trusted research environment, and to encourage public trust and to get the public on board to support the initiative. In France, we have, similarly to England, another big national initiative, the Plan France Médecine Génomique 25, which had or has as an ambition to sequence 235 genomes per year between 2020 and 25. There are 4 pilot projects, partly already set up, the others about to be set up, to collect data from patients with cancer, rare disease, common disease, and among the general French population. For data analysis, there's a centralized system, the data collector analyzer, and consent in France is regulated by law, by the French bioethics law. As you may know, they are regularly revised every, I can't remember, 4 or 6 years, and the last revision was in 2021. Consent in France is strictly separated between consent in the clinical setting and in the research setting, because genomic sequencing or any genetic test in France in the clinic can happen only for diagnosis, treatment, and family history. And the consent in research setting asks the participant to choose whether they want additional findings to be returned to them. Other than in England, in France, there's a strict obligation to return relevant findings to relatives. In case the patient does not want to contact their relative, the health professional has an obligation to communicate relevant, obviously not everything, but relevant information to relatives. And since 2021, with the last revision, there's also a new statement that where patients cannot express their will anymore or are deceased, testing may be undertaken if in public interest. And yeah, I don't know any further definition about what is understood here as in public interest. The French plan focuses very much on data sharing collaborations internationally across data. The genomic data in France is held by the Health Data Hub, the French Health Data Hub, which serves as the unique entry point to access health data for research. And data, similarly to England, can only be remotely accessed and processed on the FDH, on the Data Hub platform, and if research is promoting public interests. The Health Data Hub in France is stored in Microsoft's Azure cloud, which is based in the US, and this raises constantly and at the moment huge concerns about privacy, and because it leaves, like the data leaves the GDPR space, entering or being stored in the US with very different legal setup. So this concerns a lot of critique, raises a lot of critique and concerns. Generally in France, we can say that there's a strong, although the French Health Data Hub has been commissioned to build a public engagement initiative and working stream, there has been not much done in this area so far. And until now, the French plan strongly focuses on expert knowledge and knowledge of high-level civil servants. So with very little engagement of the public. In Germany, very briefly, because most of you will know the situation better than I and I understand the cluster. We have heard already today that due partly to historical reason, but also to just the federal setup, data has been scattered or is still scattered around the country in different institutions, universities, etc. And there's no large integrated genome resource yet established. So in 2020, the National Research Data Infrastructure was set up with the GHGA as a consortium. And the GHGA is mission tasked to develop a rigorous data governance structure to translate research findings into routine clinical care. And also there's a strong emphasis on building and developing models for consent. There are different modules developed by the ELSI team for whether clinicians, researchers, or institutions collect the data. So there's a strong emphasis on rigorous and trustworthy governance in Germany to gain public support. Again, as we have heard earlier, there's the Genome-DE, which is more looking after or like managing data that is generated from clinical care, and the GHGA handling data collected or obtained from research and clinical trials. It is set up to operate according to the FAIR principles, and the ELSI team is very strongly involved in developing consent material and other information materials through participant representatives involvement and democratic forums. So in Germany, it is very important due to the difficulties of gaining public trust to data sharing activities to involve the public and have these democratic forums. And it is important exactly to do this by being transparent, accountable, reliable, and yes. So as we have seen, there are different factors, historical, political, cultural factors that shape each country's response to the challenges posed by genomics and the setup and the implementation into clinic. In UK, it has a very strong tradition to emphasize individual autonomy, to respect privacy rights. And so we have a strong emphasis today on individual stakeholders to develop policies via upstream public debates and engagement. So it is very important to involve the people to help developing policies. And this is similar in Germany, partly due to the historical experience also of two dictatorships that have not always been very respectful or not at all respectful to with regard to data privacy. So there's some reason for big concern, or like what makes it difficult in Germany to get the support. And we also see that there's a very strong reliance and emphasis on public consultations, democratic forums, and patient participant involvement. In France, it is a still very centralized state, which has a often top-down model. We see there is law, legal regulation is extremely important, and expert knowledge representing a top-down governance approach that is typical for French policy development. And Although each country addresses emerging challenges in their own way, there are some communalities. Generally, each country, however, they implement it differently. They recognize that it is important to obviously secure trust, and that trust requires citizens to be informed about and understand what they agree to. And for this, it is important to have transparent and accountable procedures, and it is also important to show that the uses of data generate benefit to the public. In conclusion, we see that the like big genomic initiatives, large health data collection management raise questions about what is reasonable for citizens to expect of scientists and health systems in terms of use and management of their data. In other words, challenges are posed to public trust and need to be addressed by, or can be addressed, as we have seen, by transparent and accountable governance programs involving public and patients, by building trusted research environments through transparent consent protocols that place patient benefit over economic benefit. And this is something we have been discussing in our latest workshop, but not published yet, like the difficult relationship between public and private partnerships and how these challenge public trust. And the third point is that it's important to be aware of concerns about cross-border data transfer, because there are different regulations, expectations, and concerns related to this. So, thank you.